Welcome to another episode of CrossTalk. My name is Kevin Tocci, and like we like to do from time to time is take our cameras out into the field and have conversations. We are back in Chief Tim Clancy, Fire Chief Tim Clancy's office. If you recall, not too long ago, we had a more or less of a formal conversation as Fire Chief, got to know him a little bit. Now we're having this opportunity to talk a little bit. It's the colder months are setting in, and it's kind of a little bit of a conversation about some of the things to keep in mind when it comes to heating your home and the best ways to keep you and your family safe, especially when it comes to this time of year that sometimes we see a little bit more when it comes to fires than normal. Is that correct, Chief?
Correct. When I reached out to you, one of the biggest concerns we have is based upon some of the situations going on in the world, and we're coming into the colder months, that it could quite possibly be an increase in fires this year for us, as well as just getting the message out about some of the fire safety concerns we have.
Let's talk about general fire safety and maybe just some common sense things people want to keep in mind when it comes to heating their home, when it comes to whether it's like, you know, when you get up in the morning and you use an electric blanket, be sure that it's off. Little tips and tidbits like that.
There's a lot of great stuff out there right now, but one of the biggest things to do is make sure that you're heating your house appropriately. We discussed this not too long ago in a different conversation. We're concerned about alternative means of heating. One of the biggest things most people can do is, whether you have oil or gas, is to have those serviced regularly so that they're maintained by a professional, so that you know they're operating efficient and they're safe. If they're operating efficiently, they should be using less fuel, which in turn can help lower the cost. The costs are rising, and there's nothing we can do about that, but the key factor is to maintain safety in your home for you and your family. And I always throw my plug in about make sure your smoke detectors are working, your carbon monoxide detectors are working as well. Some of the things you brought up, Kevin, if you're using electric blankets, make sure they're off. Follow the manufacturer's recommendation. We can build off the electric blanket and go to, if you have a wood stove, if you have a pellet stove, have those serviced by a professional. Make sure those are appropriately working, they're functioning appropriately, and most importantly, your chimneys are working how they're supposed to be. We had talked briefly before about space heaters. A lot of people will subsidize some heating to offset with space heaters. The biggest thing is to make sure that's approved by underwriter laboratories. Make sure it's approved, that's been tested, that it's safe. The thing with that is, everybody that looks at one, it says it'll turn off if it shuts. It'll turn off if it falls over. 100%. That's what they're tested to do. But what it doesn't relay to people is make sure stuff's away from it. If you put it right next to your couch, it could catch a couch on fire. If you put it too close to clothing or drapes or whatever the case may be, any flammables, it could catch on fire. So follow the recommendations on that as far as spacing around the unit, and make sure you buy a quality one.
Let's digress back to wood stoves and chimneys. Why is it important to regularly maintenance not only the wood stove or the pellet stove, but the chimney most important?
I think you remember a story I might have shared with you previously. Have them serviced so that you know they're working. One of the biggest things with the woods burning, the wood stove and the fireplaces, will be the buildup of the creosote. The creosote is, in turn, when the temperature gets hot enough, is what catches on fire and which leads to a chimney fire. The chimney is designed to keep that in check, but if it's an older chimney and there's cracks or there's any weaknesses in it, that's when we have the problems with the chimney fires expanding to the houses. And then you end up with a house fire instead of just a chimney fire. And I shared with you in another session, know what's there, have it looked at, because we had a situation in a surrounding community that there was a power outage. It got chilly. They started a fire in their fireplace, and unbeknownst to them, they had recently purchased a house. When they remodeled, they stopped the chimney at the level of the second floor. So in essence, when they started the fire in the fireplace, it started a fire on the second floor.
Wow.
Make sure they're working. There's a lot of old houses here that, if the chimney hasn't been used in a significant amount of time, have a qualified person take a look at it.
As a public safety official, and knowing that you have conversations with other chiefs in and around the South Shore, when it was announced that we were going to see a little bit of a bump when it came to electricity and heating costs, what was the first concern that was discussed amongst your colleagues?
We had a pretty significant conversation about our concerns as far as alternative means. How are people going to heat their houses? Are they going to do it appropriately? Are we going to see a big surge in the use of space heaters? Are you going to see people using the fireplaces that they haven't used in a long time? Will they just buy anything to keep warm? Because, I mean, it comes down to like the Maslow's hierarchy. You have these self-needs that you have to take care of yourself, and keeping your family warm's one of them. We were just concerned that people would be going without. I was just glancing over. We were told at least a 54 to 60% increase in electricity. Gas is up about 30%, and oil has been fluctuating. And that's going to put some constraints on some people that will have to make some tough decisions on where they keep their house at, temperature-wise. And our concern was just to be able to provide information through different programs to allow these people to have access to knowledge and also know that there's resources out there.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's a source of pride if folks don't want to stick their hand out and ask for something. Let's talk a little bit about that, where it's, that's why these programs are designed for those who might be experiencing a tough moment or two in their lifetime.
One of the things is no one should ever be ashamed to ask for help. We should all be helping each other in our community. Amen. And we should all understand that people at different times in their lives have different priorities and different needs. But if a family is working hard, making X amount of money, and then your electric bill and your gas bill go up together over 100%, there is going to be some strain put on you. And you still have to live, you still have to eat, you still have to have your other needs. That being said, if you reach out to your senior centers, your community groups, they are willing to help. No one wants to ask for help, but there are times that you should ask for help. And those resources are great and they're confidential.
Okay. Let's move on to talking about, other than when it gets cold, the other thing that comes with this time of year is winter storms, whether it's a rainstorm or if we get a blizzard, we get high wind situations. Let's talk about when it comes to storm and power outages, what folks should do.
So recently we just had a practice in this. Although it was rain, it could have very easily been snow this time of year. And not only am I the fire chief, but I'm also the emergency management director. So it's my job to prepare the town for these events. We spun up some stuff. We looked at it. We put out a couple postings about awareness. Even though we knew it was going to be rain and not a snowstorm, it's good practice for us to get the information pushed out to the public. Our biggest concern is what you saw in Buffalo. There's a historic storm that just took place in Buffalo. There's stories of people, and first of all, God bless the people that lost their lives in the storm. I don't know exactly what the count is now, but there has been a loss of life with that storm. And there's also been cases of where fire trucks, police cars, and ambulances were stuck and they were abandoned. And they had to walk back to their fire stations and or take shelter in neighbors' home. And that shows a sense of community, that people were opening their doors and letting strangers in during this time of a storm. For us, we start planning for storms as soon as they come on the horizon. I follow the weather very closely this time of year, and have a team composed of my deputy, one of my captains, and our administrative assistants that we talk a lot about the weather. And the biggest thing is to make sure the people are aware and prepared. As far as storms go, snowstorms are snowstorms. We're in New England, right? To be expected. The snowstorms are pretty much routine until we get to certain amounts. The big caveat to that is when we lose the power. It's one thing if we lose the power in the spring, summer, or fall. It's a totally different situation when we lose it during the winter. People will start getting cold. How long is restoration? So we try and push the information out through our different avenues, whether it's reverse 911 calls, social media, or just general on the board downtown, trying to get the information out to the people so that they know, listen, the storm is coming, it can be potentially dangerous. There's some pushback on occasion. Oh, you warn us about every storm. Yep, we will warn you about every storm. We're not trying to make you numb to the situation, but we want you to know so that it's coming. That being said, I want you prepared, so if the bad storm happens, you are prepared so that you can take care of you and your family. The power outages are a huge event. As you know, we had some issues in the past with long duration outages. The fire chiefs of Massachusetts, per a conversation that we had a few weeks ago, have worked diligently to work with the utility companies to have a plan. I will tell you, this last storm, we were receiving regular updates with their plan. Whitman was very fortunate we didn't lose any power, but communities around us did have decent outages or substantial outages. And the biggest thing with that is when the storm and the power is out, there's always this misnomer that, oh, it's all out. Well, it may be or it may not be. So the warning that I generally give all the time is consider any power line that is down on the street is live, and stay away from them. Give them plenty of room and report them to us, whether it's through 911, call 911, which will be referred to our emergency operations center if it's up and operating, and we will come out and investigate it and relay it to National Grid.
Let's talk about how times have changed. You've been in the fire service long enough to know that there was angst several years ago that there wasn't necessarily a great collaboration between the power companies and public safety when it was whether it was down wires, whether it was outages. How has that changed over the years?
There's been groups that have been formed to speak to each other. It went before Department of Public Safety as well. There was hearings. And then it just developed into a partnership. We're all trying to do the same thing. They want to deliver power to the customers, and nobody in this community wants power delivered to their customers more than me. I jokingly said this in a presentation, we can get 10 feet of snow. It's okay as long as we have power. And people can go about their lives and function and understand that power is the key to this. We run into a lot of situations. We've been fortunate through the town. Most of our senior centers now have generators. Our infrastructure we've built up that our buildings have generators. So in the event we have a long duration problem and the power company, which I'll come back to, it can't get the power restored in a reasonable amount of time, we do have the means to open warming centers, charging centers. What we have found is most people are more than willing to come to a charging center. They'll come to a charging center, use the Wi-Fi, do their work, but when it's time to go to bed, they go home. And that's okay. That's what those centers are for. Back to the power company, I believe we've developed a relationship with them in which the communication is much more open. We get updates ahead of time that there's storms coming, possible storm this coming weekend. And we start getting regular updates on the communication as well, a lot better than it was. The chairman of the FCAM Utilities Committee, Chief Brian Nardelli from Brockton, we talk all the time, and he has a great relationship with the leadership of those power companies.
Let's talking about alternative power. You talk about charging centers. Some folks are proactive and may have their own home generator, but doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is operating them safely, especially when it comes to where they're running them. You want to kind of just remind folks about where they should have things set up and be smart about it.
Yeah, one of the biggest things with generators is we see problems when it comes to carbon monoxide calls. There were several high-profile calls in the area, not necessarily in Whitman, but in the area last year, which people were running generators in a garage. And generally, they felt it was okay because the garage door was open, but the carbon monoxide was enough that it pressurized and went into the house. They had several significant incidents last year with that. One of the things with the generators, if you're running a generator, make sure it's set up appropriately. What you don't want to do is to become an armchair electrician and try and do it yourself, because that leads to a bunch of problems and can damage your house too. Have a qualified electrician put in a transfer switch. Have it so that your generator, code says 5 to 10 feet, I'll see you 5 to 10 feet, throw it 15, 20 feet away from the house with the exhaust facing away from the building to get it away from the house so you don't run into any issues with CO from that. One of the biggest dangers, and I don't think we ever talk about it enough, is the people that have put their generators in, we'll use the term illegally, or not up to code. They can actually, without shutting their main off in their house, they can back feed the electrical system. So one of these line workers, they're out there trying to restore power to the community, can get zapped when they take a shock and potentially be killed because you didn't take the right steps to protect everything. One is protecting your family, but you got to protect the people that are going to protect you. Generators are a great thing. My neighborhood, when the power goes out, you hear everybody's sheds are opening and generators are getting dragged out because we do live in New England, and with big events, it could be a multiple day event. This last day event was categorized, if we lost power, it could take up to 72 hours for restoration. And that's a long time.
How about as far as putting out a generator while there is heavy precipitation. Is there danger in that?
You know, you got to follow the manufacturer's recommendation. I just saw it the other day. A person had built like a doghouse in their backyard, just a shut roof, to put their generator under. They are designed to run, but one of the things we found several years ago when it was super cold and we didn't have power for a long time, people were shutting their generators down at night, and they were freezing. So you don't think about that. You know, the oil starts to freeze up and it gets really cold, and then they can't get their generator running again. So basically follow your manufacturer's recommendations on how they suggest that you run it and have it in your property.
Very good. Let's kind of transition from talking about safety. Is there anything else we want to make sure we touch upon? I know you had some notes. Can we touch upon those? Or do you think we've already kind of...
We've kind of just covered it. You know, DFS on their website, you can go to mass.gov, look for the Department of Fire Services. They have a Keep Warm, Keep Safe program with some links on that, some helpful information. We're going to put it up on our Facebook page and push it out a little bit just for people to have the knowledge. And it's not that people don't understand it, it's just it's something you may not think about. If we can bring this to the front of it and let people think about it a little bit and make the community a little bit safer, I'm all for that. So we'll be putting that out on our Facebook page. But I think we covered most things.
We are coming to that time of year where conversations are had ahead of time of the annual town meeting, the spring town meeting. It's hard to believe that we're right around the corner. And these are times that you're having conversations with the finance committee, with the town administrator. Talk about how important budget season is when it comes to making sure that you are properly staffing and you have the most up-to-date equipment to be able to service this community.
We are headed into budget season. We're starting our meetings coming up to present our first round of budgets for our needs. You know, I look at needs, wants, and desires. Needs is what we need. Wants would be cool, and desires is maybe down the future. I try and do a forecast of several years. We do it more so with some capital projects, but where are we now, and where do we want to be in 1, 3, and 5 years? One of the things in Whitman, we work well together. Historically, we've been able to sit down, we can work well together, and that's with the FinCom, the town administrator, the selectmen, all through the whole town infrastructure. We can sit down and we can talk about it. And we can understand the needs and wants of each other. And there's been times in the past, even though I haven't been chief a long time, we've been able to sit down and been like, hey, could you push this off for a little bit longer because they need this and this is a high priority. And I think we have a good partnership on that we will work together. Our service is directly related to staffing. The services we provide are directly related to staffing, so therefore one of our biggest costs is staffing. That being said, my goal is to maintain our staffing and to continue to increase as the situation warrants in town, as we increase in size, more development. And we'll work together with the FinCom and the TA and the selectmen to see about that in the future.
Okay. Anything you want to kind of put out there, anything that you foresee you may need to ask for? Do you kind of feel as though it's you status quo from year to year?
We have to evaluate where we're at. Status quo is only good while it can be, right? As the town continues to change and the dynamics of the town change and we can continue to grow, we will need to increase. Whether it's staffing is always a big one. We've asked for staffing over the years. We're fortunate we have six members per shift now, day deputy and myself, so there's a number of us around during the day, and also most of us were available at night as well. Right now, I'm looking to see some future plans for some more inspectional programs, increase some of the safe stuff as soon as that comes through, and just try and let the community know what we do. We'll be going into our first round. I go January 3rd to meet with FinCom, and we'll start going through it for our needs and what we, I have some wants too. We have some apparatus that are going to be lined up in the future, and I think it's the most reasonable thing to do is come up with a plan on how we're going to get there. The town has come up with a plan that they allocate an X amount of money every year if available for ambulances. I think in the future we should look into programs like that for different apparatus too, so it doesn't place a huge financial burden on the community at one time.
Well, we are also at that time of year where we're still dealing with this thing that has went from a pandemic to supposedly it's an endemic. We're talking COVID. Does that play a role in your budgeting at this particular time, and not so much?
It does to a point, because we have had members go down in the past that we have to cover while they're out. The services we provided to help with COVID, such as the vaccination clinics and the booster clinics. We were very fortunate that there was COVID money, and then there was APA money, so that's helped out drastically with that. The biggest strain on departments during the COVID pandemic, hopefully endemic now, was staffing and filling staffing and making sure our members stay safe and we have enough people here to provide the services. And I said this to you before, the services the community wants, needs, and most importantly deserves.
Anything we haven't touched upon during our conversation here, but you want to at least take a moment to at least talk about, or at least remind folks?
Just be safe this winter heating. I know times are going to be difficult for a lot of people. Keep in mind the safety factor. If you do choose to use or go look at some of the alternative methods of heating, please make sure it's UL approved, Underwriter Laboratories. Make sure it's been tested, that it's safe. Follow the directions, follow the recommendations, and keep your family safe.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time and your patience to share this information and discuss it for the betterment of our community and the safety of our community.
No problem.
You got it. And until our next conversation, I want to thank you for tuning in to shows like this one. You always can send an email to info@whca.tv with subject matter for a show like this. Until our next conversation, have yourself a great day.